Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Bulletin and these are the headlines. Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register protest over ceasefire violations along the line of control. In a statement, the Foreign Office said yesterday's unprovoked fighting by Indian troops wounded a civilian in the Rakchakri sector. Spokesperson HOUTHI said Indian forces are continuously targeting civilian populated areas. Libya's military has expressed reservations over the inclusion of Khalifa Haftar's LNA's representatives in the peace talks. Libyan army spokesman Colonel Mohammed Kununu said Haftar forces' air defenses are still active in Sarat and Jufra regions. Earlier, the UN said Libya's voting sides agreed to hold elections within 18 months in a major breakthrough. Saudi Arabia has urged the world to take a decisive stance against Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. In a statement, King Salman bin Abdulaziz said Riyadh will keep supporting Yemenis until they restore sovereignty from Iranian hegemony. He said the kingdom supports efforts to bring peace to the Middle East through negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis. In Armenia, 10 leading opposition figures have been arrested for protesting against a ceasefire deal with Azerbaijan. The pact secures Azerbaijan's territorial gains after 6 weeks of fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is facing growing pressure to step down, but he has refused to do so. The United States has recorded over 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and more than 145,000 cases overnight. In India, 550 people have died and nearly 48,000 infected overnight, with the caseload crossing 8.6 million. Pakistan has registered over 1,800 cases and 34 deaths overnight, taking the death toll to 7,055. The global number of COVID-19 infections has topped 52 million, with over 1.28 million deaths. And in football, world champions France have suffered a shock 2-0 home defeat to Finland in their latest friendly at the Stade de France. Finland's twice in the 28th and the 31st minutes ended the host 12-match unbeaten streak. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to protest ceasefire violations by Indian troops along the line of control. The summoning comes after Indian forces wounded a civilian in unprovoked fighting along the line of control. Foreign Office spokesperson HOUTHI said the Indian forces are continuously targeting civilian areas with heavy artillery. He urged India to respect the 2003 ceasefire agreement. India has so far committed 2,660 ceasefire violations, killing 20 and wounding 203 innocent people in 2020 alone. Prime Minister Azad Jammu and Kashmir Raja Muhammad Farooq Haider Khan has met Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa. The military's media wing said both the officials discussed matters of mutual interests. It said the situation of line of control and occupied Jammu and Kashmir was also discussed in the meeting. The media wing said General Bajwa reiterated Pakistan Army's support and commitment to the Kashmiris and their cause for freedom. Afghanistan Ambassador to Pakistan Najibullah Ali Khail has met Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Islamabad. In a tweet, Pakistan's military media wing said the two sides discussed the regional security situation. The Army Chief lauded the services of the Afghan ambassador in promoting bilateral ties. The two dignitaries also discussed the Afghan peace process and issues pertaining to border management. Earlier, a 22-member Afghan delegation met Pakistan's trade and commerce officials at Torkham border. The two sides urged the higher authorities to remove hurdles in bilateral trade. The United Nations says Libya's warring sides have agreed to hold elections within 18 months in a major breakthrough. This comes as 75 Libyan participants chosen by the UN have been meeting in Tunis for political talks since Monday. In a news conference, UN's acting Libya envoy says the preliminary agreement focuses on a roadmap to free, fair and inclusive elections. Stephanie Williams said the roadmap will also include steps to unite institutions. The political dialogue will continue today, focusing on making a unified transition government.
The roadmap also outlines steps for uniting Libya's institutions, restoring public services, and to begin a very important process of national reconciliation and transitional justice, and to quickly address the issue of those displaced inside and outside of Libya.
Saudi Arabia has urged the world to take a decisive stance against Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. In a statement, King Salman bin Abdulaziz said Riyadh will keep supporting Yemenis until they restore sovereignty from Iranian hegemony. The king said Iran's regional projects and interference in other countries poses greater danger to the world. He said the international community should guarantee a drastic handling of Iran's efforts to obtain weapons of mass destruction. King Salman also condemned the Iran-aligned Houthi movement's deliberate targeting of civilians inside Saudi Arabia via drones. Meanwhile, he said the kingdom supports efforts to bring peace to the Middle East through negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis. The Saudi-led coalition says it has destroyed two explosive-laden drones launched towards Saudi Arabia by Yemen's Houthi rebels. This follows fresh threats by the rebels of a new string of attacks on economic and military facilities in the kingdom. Houthis want foreign companies and civilians to stay away from the Saudi military installations to avoid being hurt. Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sarai said the raids are retaliation for the ongoing aggression of the coalition forces. He particularly mentioned the regions of Hijaz and Najd as targets. In Armenia, 10 leading opposition figures have been arrested for protesting against a ceasefire deal with Azerbaijan. The pact secures Azerbaijan's territorial gains after 6 weeks of fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh. Protesters say the politicians could face up to 10 years in jail term for their role in violent protests. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is facing growing pressure to step down, but he has refused to do so. Meanwhile, a no-fly zone has been declared in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh except for the military movement. The fighting had left more than 1,400 people dead and forced thousands to flee their homes. Kyrgyz Prime Minister Sadir Japarov says he will step down as acting president in order to run in January 10th presidential election. Addressing the media, he said Parliamentary Speaker Talant Memitov will constitutionally take over as acting head of the state. Japarov had previously promised not to run in the coming presidential elections. The country's constitution also does not allow caretaker leaders to run in the presidential election. Japarov declared himself as the acting president of the country hours after Suranbay Jeenbekov resigned as president on October 15 amid protests in Bishkek. Australia has appointed a special investigator to prosecute alleged war crimes committed by special forces in Afghanistan. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said there were a significant number of incidents and issues to look into. Morrison warned that the process of complex investigation will require Australia to deal with honest and brutal truths. Morrison said the chief investigator will address the criminal matters made in the Inspector General's report.
This is a relationship that he understands very deeply based on his broad experience over a long period of time in the United States, and he's engaged in, of course, as Vice President and his many other roles. And I was also had the opportunity to personally extend that invitation for him and Dr. Biden to join us next year as part of the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the ANZUS relationship.
The investigator will gather evidence and report to the Commonwealth Director of the Public Prosecutions for consideration. Now moving on, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the western part of Tigray region has been liberated in a military offensive. Abiy said the army is providing humanitarian assistance and services in the liberated areas. The Ethiopian Prime Minister also accused his foes of atrocities during a week of fighting. He added the national military has found bodies of its members who were died and shot in Tigray. State media says Parliament has removed immunity from prosecution for 39 members, including Tigray's president. Meanwhile, the UN stated aid agencies are unable to restock food and other emergency supplies in Tigray due to lack of access. The UN Refugee Agency said negotiations are underway with both the sides for humanitarian corridors to be opened. Lebanon and Israel have kicked off a third round of maritime border talks under the auspices of the United States and the United Nations. Lebanese state media said the delegations met at a UN peacekeeping base in the border town of Nakura. In October, Beirut and Tel Aviv agreed to begin the talks in what Washington hailed as a historic agreement. The negotiations are meant to focus on an 860 square kilometer disputed sea area, according to a map registered with the UN in 2011. The first two rounds of talks were held last month. In the first calls with Joe Biden since US elections, Japan, South Korea and Australia reaffirmed plans to tackle issues including climate change and regional security. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga quoted Biden as saying he looks forward to strengthening the US-Japan alliance. He said Biden wanted to work together for a free and open Indo-Pacific. In Seoul, President Moon Jae-in's office said Biden reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to defend South Korea. Moon's spokesperson said he asked Biden for close cooperation for the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison said he spoke with Biden about emission reduction technology. Japan and the US have started negotiations on cost sharing of 55,000 American troops based in the country. In a statement, Tokyo said the two-day formal talks started in Washington. The two sides say costs shouldered by Japan have played a crucial role in ensuring smooth activities of the US forces in the country. They said the two countries anticipate a mutually beneficial outcome from the talks. The 5-year cost-sharing deal between the two countries will end in March next year. Russia has accused Ukraine of violating an agreement on opening new crossing points in the Donbas region. After a video conference of the contact group, a Russian envoy Boris Gryzlov said Kiev promised peace before an election, but he said Ukraine resumes shelling and armed provocations in Donetsk and Lugansk regions once its elections are over. However, Ukraine announced the opening of the checkpoints on November the 10th. The United States has recorded over 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and more than 145,000 cases overnight. The global number of COVID-19 infections has topped 52 million with over 1.28 million deaths. More in this report.
As countries scramble to strike deals with the promising vaccine candidates, COVID-19 continues to claim thousands of lives every day. The powerful second wave of the fatal virus is making the already grim situation in North and South America even worse. The spread of the pandemic in Latin America's worst-hit country, Brazil, is worsening with the death rate rising steeply. In Argentina, President Alberto Fernandez and several of his ministers are now in preventative isolation after coming in contact with an infected official. Meanwhile, new restrictions have been imposed in the U.S. state of New York as Christmas approaches.
Regarding we expect COVID to spike dramatically over the next 30 days to 60 days, right into Christmas. And this is going to be a big damper on the economy, right in a period of time where, you know, people really want to spend time with their families and spend money on gifts. And so the timing is horrible to have this. So we're really not, I really want to be a bull. Honestly, I'm feeling like I want to be a bull, but I think I'm going to have to wait till next year. I want to see an inauguration, and I want to see a strategy to defeat coronavirus. And
the situation in Europe continues to deteriorate, with Italy now among the top 10 worst hit countries, while the UK has joined the unfortunate list of states with over 50,000 deaths. Spain has started mandatory mass testing amid an aggressive spread of the virus, but the majority hit by economic fallout of the coronavirus have their reservations over the government's decision.
I think this is clearly good, but I think it would be interesting if people could choose if they want to get tested or not, because there may be people who need to do it immediately and don't have the money to pay for it.
In Asia, India continues to be ravaged by the disease as it recorded nearly 48,000 cases and 550 deaths overnight. Meanwhile, Iran has imposed new COVID-19 restrictions, battling record rise in deaths and cases.
In Pakistan, 34 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 7,055. The Health Ministry says 1,808 people have tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said there are over 22,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of nearly 350,000 countrywide cases, more than 320,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 152,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 108,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, over 22,000 people have been infected so far. Welcome back. Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman Al Khalifa has taken over as the new Prime Minister of the country. This comes after Bahrain's long-serving Prime Minister Sheikh Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa died yesterday at the age of 84. Crown Prince Salman is part of a younger generation of Gulf rulers seen as pushing social and economic reforms. Sheikh Khalifa had repeatedly put down opposition unrest during a half-century in power. He was the world's longest-serving Prime Minister, who held the post since Bahrain's independence in 1971. The Al Khalifa family is reigning Bahrain since 1783. In the Philippines, at least one person has died and 3 others are missing after Typhoon VAMCO paralyzed parts of the capital, Manila. Residents await rescue by boat due to rising floodwaters. VAMCO is the 21st cyclone to hit the Philippines this year. The nation is still reeling from Goni, the most powerful storm this year. VAMCO sustained winds of 130 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 215 kilometers per hour across Luzon Island. Officials say 40,000 homes have been either fully or partially submerged in the area. VAMCO is expected to head towards Vietnam. In the U.S., tropical storm ETA has spun towards Florida's west coast, nearing its 4th landfall in a matter of days. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency in 13 counties due to the surging threats. The National Hurricane Center says the storm is traveling with the sustained winds of up to 70 miles per hour. National Weather Service forecast heavy rainfall, storm surge and possible tornadoes on the west coast of Florida. State's governor has requested Federal Emergency Management Agency to declare a pre-landfall state of emergency to mobilize resources. Swathes of Mexico's state of Tabasco have been underwater days after Storm ETA left the region flooded. Locals in Tabasco accuse authorities of providing no support for storm victims. The streets of the city of Villahermosa resemble the canals of Venice as floodwaters after Storm ETA have yet to subside. Locals are using small boats and they have to climb ladders to reach the second stories of their homes to escape the floodwaters. People say they are reluctant to go to government-sponsored shelters due to the COVID-19 threat. An extremely rare purple pink diamond is sold for over $26 million at Sotheby's in Geneva. The oval stone, dubbed as the Spirit of the Rose, weighs 14.83 carats. Sotheby's says the rough diamond was called Nintsy in honor of the Russian-Polish ballet dancer and choreographer. It was mined by Russian diamond producer Alrosa in July 2017. It took around a year of painstaking work to cut the finished diamond to shape while preserving its pink color. The name of the winning bidder has not been publicly disclosed. Naturally colored stones have been greatly valued as an asset by the super rich in recent years, rather than white stones. Alibaba sales for its post-COVID-19 Singles Day shopping extravaganza hit $74 billion, the world's biggest sales event, eclipsing Black Friday and Cyber Monday in the United States, spanned 4 days this year. Alibaba set primary discount days for November the 1st through November the 3rd, as well as the usual November the 11th. The e-commerce giant said lockdown-weary consumers splashed out on as many as 16 million discounted goods. Such is its size that its performance is widely considered indicative of China's post-virus economic recovery. The haul was overshadowed by a 10% drop in shares after China published draft antitrust rules aimed at internet platforms. The proposed anti-monopoly rules could increase scrutiny on e-commerce, marketplaces, and payment services. The UK's economy has bounced back from recession with a record growth of 15.5% from July to September. The Office for National Statistics said the country's economy is still 8.2% smaller than before the virus struck. The return to growth comes after a 6-month slump induced by the first coronavirus lockdown. Figures show the expansion was not enough to reverse the damage caused by the pandemic. A second lockdown began in England on 5th of November and is due to finish on December the 2nd. The economy will most likely shrink again in the final 3 months due to renewed lockdowns. European stocks have declined as investors continue to worry over the rapid spread of coronavirus across the continent. The Pan-European Stock 600 slipped over 0.5%, with banks shedding nearly 2%. Frankfurt's DAX slid nearly 1%. London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB has declined more than 0.5%, while the CAC 40 in Paris shed close to 1% as well. Earlier, all Asian... And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.